Hey, this is Thomas with Classic Electric again. A lot of times I get phone calls from people asking me to add a hot tub, an EV charger, portable generator, something. And the first thing they say to me is I don't know if there's any room in my panel or it looks like it's really full. So just because it looks full, as in this example, doesn't mean that it necessarily is. So if you were able to take a look at this for a moment, the first thing you would say is, well, I don't see any more spaces where you're going to plug anything in. Now, obviously, this panel, I went on ahead and just filled in a whole bunch of spaces because there's no wires on either side of this thing. I got a few of them up here and I just filled it up so I could say to you guys, look, it's full, except for it's actually not full. So I want to take the time to actually explain to you how I know it's not full. So when I do an estimate for a customer, usually they're there and I walk them all the way through their panel and explain all the ins and outs. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look on the panel cover and I'm going to see the writing that's on the side of this, and I'm going to read and see if there's any information I can get from here. If it's not on here, depending on how old it is, sometimes it's on the back, or in this particular example, it's actually right here on the side. You got to take the cover off. It's kind of a bummer on this particular Eaton panel where you got to look all the way in here to read it. But once you get to here, it says 4050. So that tells me, in looking at this, there is 20 breakers here. There's 20 breakers here for a total of 40. But the sticker on the side told me that it's 4050. So I know that that means, and looking at the schematic on the door here that I just showed you, I know that these bottom 5 breakers here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the other 5 corresponding on this side, are going to allow me to install a tandem breaker. What's a tandem breaker? Okay, so here's 2 breakers. This breaker right here is the one that's in the panel, and this is the one that I want to add. And if you look at them dimensionally, they're exactly the same size. I can take out the one that's in here, and I can install the one that has 2 handles instead of 1 in its place, and legally do that all day because the manufacturer says that I can do that. Now I've just added 1 more space. If I needed 2 spaces, I would just take this one out and I'd put another tandem in, and another and another and another. And I would do the same thing on the other side. At that point, if I put tandems in all 5 of these spots here and had them in all 5 here, then the panel would be legitimately full by the manufacturer's specifications. So I'm going to go to great length of showing you a bunch of different schematics and a bunch of different busing systems and whatnot, so you guys will be able to determine, if you'd like to, how many spaces you actually have left. So let's start talking about that. So as you can see, I went on ahead and changed all 5 of these out here and all 5 of them here. Now this panel truly is full. So now I want to show you some examples of what it looks like. In this upper photograph here, this is the actual one we're looking at that I was pointing to. And you'll see in this upper corner here, it says 4050. So that's what's going to tell me that this has a twinnable or a tandem option for breakers. It also, while we're at it, and this sticker is going to tell me it's a 200 amp rated panel. It says 200 amps here. The next one just below it is a 3040 space, and again, it's 200 amps. And in this next example, I have a different manufacturer, and it is listed right on the door where it's actually easy to find. And on the door of your electrical panel, it says right here 3040. And again, in this nomenclature here, it says 200 amps. In electrical panels, there are schematics that show you a diagram of exactly where you can and cannot install tandem breakers in your electrical panel. I have 5 examples. Let's take a look at those. In this example, this is a Westinghouse panel, and it says that it is a 4040. So because the numbers are exactly the same, there is no tandem option in this particular case. In the next example, down at the bottom, it gives a diagram and it says signifies duplex type breaker at the bottom. So what it's telling you is this is a picture of what a tandem breaker, or as electricians refer to them, a twin breaker, would look like. So you go back up in the chart here and you can see numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4 are standard breakers. Numbers 5, through 24 all have the dashed lines, so those can all have tandem breakers. And then you go back to 25 through 30, again, is standard. This manufacturer has decided that this is where they will allow tandems and where they want standards. As I continue through these examples, it's going to change quite a bit. Let's take a look at the next one. The next panel is the Challenger panel. Again, it tells me up at the top that it's a 30 standard spaces or an additional 10 for 40. And if you look at the schematic, numbers 1 through 10 and 21 through 30 are standard breakers. But if you start looking at the bottom 5, you will see that 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, you get the point, the last 5 in the bottom are all tandem in this case. In this example, we have a Murray panel, and numbers 1 through 18 are standard. When you get to the bottom, it gets kind of interesting. Starting on the left side with 19 and 21 as being a tandem, 23 being a standard, 25, 27 tandem, 29, 31 tandem, 33, 35 tandem, and 37, 39 tandem. So now they're starting to mix them in a little bit. You'll find on the right-hand side, it mirrors the left-hand side in this particular diagram. Now my last example, and this one's going to be a little fun. I've saved this one for years because it is really, really unique. So this is an example of another Murray panel. We just showed you a Murray, now we're showing you a different Murray. In this particular application, we're going to focus on numbers 11 through 24. And if you've been paying attention up to this point, you should catch this immediately. But in this example, they got really interesting, and they started with number 11 being standard, 12 and 13 a tandem, 14 a standard, 15 and 16 a tandem, and 17 a standard. Well, then you get to the other side, and unlike the others where the left side mirrors the right side, it's completely different entirely. 18 and 19 are tandem, 20 is a single, 21 is a single, 22 and 23 are a tandem, and 24 is a single. So it gives you kind of an idea, and the reason I went through this many examples is because they really change dramatically from one brand to another, and from one year to another, and from one type to another, which is why I wanted to take the extra time to make sure that you could really understand how these schematics work. Now I'd like to show you something else. Okay, sometimes I show up, depending on the age of the panel and how well it was taken care of. Sometimes there is no identification, and that gets to be really fun. There's no sticker on the side. There's no writing on the inside of the door. Heck, even once in a blue moon, I find one that doesn't have a door, but that's a little beyond this video. At that point, you need a new panel. But if your panel's in good shape and your identification is missing, there is another way to be able to identify which breakers are standard and which breakers are tandem. So I've taken the same panel we've been looking at. I've taken the liberty of taking these out so you could actually see what's referred to as the bus system. This is what the breakers click on to. So I told you earlier that this was 20 down here, 20 down here, and I could redo the bottom 5, take out the standards and put in tandems, because the identification on this panel told me I could, and I showed you some examples of what to look for. But all of that being gone, the other way you can look is there's actually solid busing and forked busing. A tandem breaker will fit onto forked busing, but it will not fit on solid busing. As an example, take a look at this one here. As you can see, all of this busing is a solid block. In the next example, the top 1, 2, 3, 4 are solid, and every one thereafter has a fork in it. And the next example, all of those have forks in them. So again, if you have a forked terminal, that automatically tells me that it will accept a tandem breaker, regardless of having to look at the sticker on the panel, because this is how they all are. So quickly I can identify in certain situations which ones are and which ones are not, just by looking at the bus. Now, there is one other thing I want to bring to your attention. I'll show up sometimes, I'll read the stickers or I'll look at the bussing and I'll realize how many spaces I can have in here. In this particular application, I put the breakers back in. It's 50 spaces. This is legitimately full. I can't add any more. Well, what happens if I I don't want to do a panel change and take this one out and somebody tries to sneak this one in? Well, I didn't bother to push it in because I know it's not going to fit. I can literally try to cram on this all I want to, it's not going in there. So you might ask the question, well, why is it that when I go to look at mine and I got a tandem breaker where it's not supposed to be? In most of the cases, not all cases, but in most of the cases, what has happened, and I'm going to show this to you, I tell the customer, I says, you want to bet that they broke the breaker? And the customer looks at me like, what do you mean they broke the breaker? Have you lost your mind? I'm like, no, unfortunately, this is something that happens quite a little bit. So here's an example of a couple of breakers. And this is why this breaker won't go in. This has a rejection clip, meaning it will only go on to a forked breaker because that's the only place it's supposed to go. So what happens is a guy, and this is not right, do not do this under any circumstances, major cause of a fire, do not do this. Because what happens is they go in with a screwdriver, they go in there and they take that rejection clip out and they break the breaker. Well, now you got a big problem. And obviously this is where the breaker is connecting to the bus, and so you're loosening this up, so now you have a loose breaker. That's a problem. You can have heating problems. So a lot of times I will go in, and that's what happened in this case. I see this all the time. Somebody doesn't have enough room in their panel, so they make room in the panel. And the reason they do that is it's a lot easier to try to shove something in than it is to have to change the whole panel out, and causes a significant probability of danger. So don't ever do this, but if you see one that's not in there, there is a decent possibility that somebody's done this. So the first thing you're going to want to do, obviously, is take this, throw it away, and get the correct one and get it in the correct space, because this panel is designed to have breakers in the correct spots. It was designed that way. It needs to be installed that way. So I'm going to have some additional videos that are going to explain in more detail about what goes on in your electrical panel, including panel changes, what is a service change, and what all goes into each one of them. Hopefully I was able to teach you today if you're able to tell if your panel's full or not. Thanks for watching. This is Thomas with Classic Electric, and this is a wrap.